All right, welcome everyone to Between Worlds, Between Words, Poets in Conversation with Irena Klepfisz. This is when you clap. Thank you. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder, along with my partner Donnie Jokum, of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division. The Bureau is an independent, all-volunteer queer bookstore that we founded in 2012 and that has been here at the LGBT Community Center since 2014. Today we are being helped by our volunteer, Jeffrey Archer. Thank you very much, Jeffrey. So as an all-volunteer independent queer bookstore, we are dependent on sales and donations to keep this machine going. So I'm going to pass a bag around, and we especially encourage folks to make a donation if you know you won't be buying any books, if you are able to. There's some change in the bag, and there's also a QR code if you'd like to make a donation to Venmo. If you're able to give something, we appreciate it. So I'll pass that around. And see me twice. If you're not already on our email list and you would like to be, you can sign up for that at the back of the room. You'll get an email every other Monday about our upcoming events, of which there are many. And those of you watching online, if you want to sign up for that newsletter, you can do that on our website, bgsqd.com. Right, there it is. I knew there was another part. And our regular business hours are Wednesdays through Sundays from 1 to 7 p.m. And then we often stay open later when we have events. So before we get started, I wanted to read a land acknowledgement. The Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-Native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. The Bureau also recognizes Palestinian liberation as a fundamental part of our collective queer liberation. And we encourage you to read our statement that is in the back corner about why we feel it is important for queer people, especially at this moment, to speak out in solidarity with Palestine. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to M. Marie Cole and Danila Machado of Exquisites, a Brooklyn-based queer and trans poetry series. They are the organizers of today's event. Please give them a very warm welcome. Thank you.
I'm not used to having a thing, but this makes sense since we only have one clipboard today.
Sure.
We usually both have our own clipboard, but we're sharing.
Yes.
We're learning to share.
Thank you so much for joining us on this rainy spring day. And again, thank you to the Bureau for having us and for all you do for DIY queer people, poets, writers, readers. We know it's no small thing to hold this third space, this beautiful space surrounded by art and books. So thank you.
Yeah, ditto.
All right, so a little bit more about us. My name is Danilo.
I'm Em.
And we are Exquisites. We are a Brooklyn-based, as mentioned, queer and trans anthology reading and workshop series. And since 2022, we have hosted over 180 poets and artists at readings, workshops, and gatherings. Our community partners have included Poetry Society of America, Word is Change, Dear Friend Books, Hot Pink Magazine, Legacy Collective, and Brooklyn Art House. We have published 4 anthologies and have received support from Brooklyn Artists Council and Poets and Writers, and our fiscally sponsored project with Fraction Atlas. And our current spring season is held at Aberdeen Community Garden in Brooklyn every first Thursday. So join us if you're around.
Yeah, if you like what you have here or experience here, please find us the first Thursday in June, Bushwick, in Bushwick, Aberdeen Community Garden, off of the Bushwick Aberdeen L stop. And today is a collaboration with the Polish Cultural Institute New York, established in 2000, is a diplomatic mission to the United States serving under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland. The mission of the Polish Cultural Institute New York is to share Polish heritage, history, and art with American audiences and to promote Poland's contributions to the success of world culture. The Institute does so through initiating, supporting, and promoting collaborations between Poland and the United States in the areas of visual art, design, film, theater, dance, literature, music, and many others. And a special thanks to Bartek, who was our point person and collaborator in this event.
Yes, would not have been possible without many partnerships and our amazing lineup of readers, starting with Ariel Goldberg, who is a writer, curator, educator, mentor, devoted to trans and queer lineages and lesser-known histories of photography. Goldberg's books include The Estrangement Principle, available for sale in the back, from Nightboat Books 2016, and The Photographer from Roof Books 2015. Their exhibition on photography's relationship to spaces for learning, images on which to build, 1970s to 1990s, was on view from 2022 to 2024 at the Contemporary Art Center in Cincinnati, Leslie Lohman here in New York, and the Chicago Cultural Center. Goldberg was the recipient of a 2020 Andy Warhol Foundation Arts Writers Book Grant and a 2024 Diamondstein Spiegel Fellowship at the New York Public Library to support their book in progress on trans and queer image cultures of the late 20th century. Goldberg has taught photo, writing, contemporary art practices independently at institutions including Bard, New School, NYU, Pratt, Cooper Union, and Rutgers. They are a proud member of ACT AUAW 1792 and is a 2025 winter apprenticeship program at the New York Peace Institute and works independently as a conflict mediator. Please welcome Ariel.
Hi everyone, thank you so much Danilo and Em and Irena. This is a real honor to celebrate you and to read with you and meet you. So I tried to take this as a prompt. I had the real pleasure of being introduced to Irena about 1.5 years ago. It feels like a lot longer because we have a lot of similar family backgrounds and there was an instant connection. But the thing that Irena and I have been working on is not really either of our writing or poetry lives. It's to spread the word and to share Judith Waterman's painting and legacy with a wider public. And I have met Irena through this incredible process of her sharing her former wife's paintings and work and their lives. And so I'm learning little bits and pieces, and I decided to take that as like a point of contact because I'm looking at a lot of Judy's paintings and prints and thinking about what's going on in them. I also have written and been obsessed with photography, and I've been writing a novel about a photographer and a writer that is based on the couple Elizabeth McCausland and Bernice Abbott. And so I did a real fusion of like doing a reading with Irena Klepfisz, a 10-year dormant novel project. How can these worlds collide? And so I thought about this, one of my favorite poems of Irena's, which is, it's a long poem called Two Sisters, and a monologue basically told in the voice of Helen Hesse, who is Eva Hesse's sister. And it reminds me of a style of documentary poetics that the art critic Elizabeth McCausland worked in as an art critic, a sort of like, Marxist art critic in the 1930s, had a column. writing about a lot of exhibitions, and was sort of in these worlds of like Muriel Rukeyser, documentary poetics. And so that is how I'm setting the stage for this piece that is really thinking about the question of like image making in romantic entanglement. So like artists and writers that are couples. I personally am in a writer-artist sort of romantic situation, which is very exhilarating. So there's a little bit of Elizabeth McCausland and Bernice Abbott in here, a little bit of me, and a little bit of me thinking about Judy Waterman's work. So I'll start us off here with a quote from an Irena Klepfisz poem that's a poem for Judy beginning a new job. On the empty canvas of the elusive marble, into the shadowy water, or of the simple water, into impenetrable rock. So that's just a little snippet of Irena's poem. All right. Part of the partnership is witness, is a nearness, in between and through the challenge of the day, is continuing the viewership of the work, the defiance, for example, of spending 1 year at least on a painting. The artist who always went to work and painted when she wasn't working. The dead have spoken to me, devotedly, sometimes persistently, perhaps through imagination games and daydreams. They ask me to jot down a message, the almost unrecorded, the detail at risk of vanishing. Being together through a durable length of time, what does it do? What impression is the other person in your mind? How often do you think of what they would think in relation to an interesting turn of phrase or work of art? What is more beautiful than accompanying a total stranger through living another day? Conjecture, osmosis, influence, making meals for one another, eating meals with one another, smelling the pillowcases with the other's scent, seeing the other's tidiness or messiness, splitting up the household chores. When she was consumed by the work, I reminded her, you still have to eat. When I was consumed by the work, she reminded me, you still have to eat. We slept next to each other. We heard some sweet words babbling in the middle of the night. All right, new section. She let me know a rock fell down the side of the mountain. It crashed into a glass tower lodged in the refuse, a pit of what's crumbled and disposed of brutally, and the impact shattered all the double-paned hurricane-proof glass, rampage, theft, and hatred for the inconvenient witnesses. How to deprogram frustration, confusion, delusion, fear. Who wants to destroy and who wants to build? They stopped selling home insurance in the upside-down world because the land was sinking. A shattered glass that stays in place but cannot flaunt transparency. Patterns that humans can study with tools of the sciences. Lichen, neon levitate from their surface, the rocks and moss. The dimensionality, that's the incredible word of the hand and mind and paint. Columns, fountains, close-ups. The facade is a drawbridge of possibilities. Straight lines, none are discrete buildings. Everything is in a bit of a freeze-frame collapse. Generalizations soothe the harsh specifics. The real and unreal of architecture, a marble wall descends into liquid. Colliding planes blur into a swirl of perspective, non-vertical, diagonal, and melts. Different senses of gravity. The greens and blues collided in a cloud of haze, the senses mid-collision, ordained with marble squiggles. The formation harkens to an eyedropper of a potion known to occasionally cure heartbreak in a cocktail. All right, new section. Times Square was a municipality unto itself. I went to her studio and stood in the hallway. Her painting took up the whole space. Outside was run by sex and drugs and entertainment, plenty of inspiration for my walk. I had to be careful who I tipped my hat to. I was not uninterested in peeking past the theater's marquee, a fantasy place imposed or to say one thing and do another inside. I like talking about money and power when talking about art. Why do some buildings get made sturdy and others collapsible? Some use smooth cement and other rough-edged and uneven stones. How does the material hold a fireplace slow-burning heat? How do the cracks reveal themselves? How does the diagonal smooth the inner support chamber, a tall ceiling, something secret in the lofted storage? I'm trying to remember where we met, at the Art Student League. I was called in as a guest critic for the end-of-year show. Not an uncommon activity for me, with friends who need some fresh ideas. She was the one with the large canvas. The point, perspectively speaking, was to give the feeling of standing inside the painting. Or did we meet at the picture department at the 42nd Street branch that made her face so familiar? Or was it that young, ambitious art historian who was talking all the time about women and feminism? Why are there no great queer art critics? Why are there no great anti-fascist, anti-genocide art critics? We were of the old guard, omission, innuendo, reservedness. The younger guard, the painter's guard, with their obsession with talking about sex, would call us repressed and judge us mercilessly. To be covert is also to be sexy, my dears. All right, that was Elizabeth McCausland back from the grave.
Our next reader is abroad right now, but they sent us a beautiful video to contribute to today. Ayaz is a poet, critic, and translator working between Istanbul and New York. From 2022 to 2024, he worked as an audio and technical manager at the Poetry Project on St. Mark's Church, and he curated the edition of 2023-2024 chapbook series for the feminist poetry press, Belladonna. Ayaz was born on a Tuesday in April.
To a fresh and blinking summerness. I have been wary and much objecting. There is a stubbornness that I grew into once that I can't seem to quit. There are two cats in the room. They are usually on the couch and sometimes on the rug, and sometimes when on the rug, they are fighting. I want to try writing to you. You once wrote a poem about cats and the taking care, and another about aunts who collect objects, who live in the north and let their nieces come to visit, who have dinner on Fridays with candles but don't call it Shabbat. The aunts with their shells and lamps and flowers drying, and their ex-girlfriends at the door, by the water, on the seat. I want to tell you about other things I've seen, like looking and meeting and folding in the morning and in the afternoon, and turning my head to the left when it's meant to go to the right. In the movie, the woman pours a pot of boiling water on the soldier's head. She is an aunt who believes in revolution, mantling the water. He is in the occupying army. Yes, the soldier. Yes, in the distance. No, I said mantling. It doesn't mean. Well, yes, I suppose it could mean. I was thinking of a house, and its door, the frame, and its cave too, perhaps. The entrance, and the growing, some narrowness to the cave, but a wideness too, at least above it, where the trees are. And the man with the gold glows, and the other men too. They are all there in a row, looking at the cave, under the green trees, and more green. In the painting, many men gather around the cave. They are waiting for resurrection. Lazarus will come back to life. The men do not know of the aunts who believe in revolution. The painting in its cave and the green trees and the gold sky make up a panel in Puccio's Maesta, his masterpiece, commissioned by the city of Siena in 1308. The painting is made of 70 panels, few of which remain in Siena. They are in Madrid and New York and London and sometimes Paris. In the painting, the cave is the shape of a coffin. The cave can be a door frame, growing smaller and wider when entered. And still, the violin quivers, and the cave opens and closes. In this cave, there is a man covered in white linen, and the green trees above are bright against the gold. He also knows of linen, and little pieces of gold floating, and the tailors who would wear a little needle on their lingle for craft. There are many men here, looking. They do not mantle. Yes, I said mantle. No, I did not say lift. And neither did I say conquer. Something might bloom here in the desert, with the gold and the green trees, and some sort of mountain. It is far from a church, but there is the story of a church. A great many people will tell this story, will remember it, will learn it and then forget it. There are soldiers near the cave. This is another cave. This cave is in Heine Score's film Lila and the Wolves, part of a scene where women living under occupation stage a wedding to bring guns and ammunition to a neighboring town, where their nephews and uncles and brothers will use the guns and ammunition to fight the occupying army. There's a blockade. The soldiers are children, like most soldiers. This is no excuse for the actions. Are you looking? A chorus of women. These aunts looked at the roses and knew they were unconquerable. The rose and the rose and rose, 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 rose. Such glory under bright sky, the flower lifting out of the ground. A poppy and then a rose. A poppy is a poppy is a poppy. A flower opening. Something might bloom here in the desert with the gold and the green trees and some sort of mountain. And when the aunts in the movie and on the set saw the revolution, they knew it was right. They stuck bullets into dates, the ones that are soft and juicy at Eid at Iftar or in the morning, hiding rifles under ruffled skirts, arranging a wedding march through town, stacking dates filled with bullets and spirals in a wide dish, parading the dates through town with music playing, and the rugs stuffed with rifles, in Palestine, Lebanon, the spinning of the women through town, the laughter of the children, and the soldiers sitting down. It is not necessary to repeat the word, but it is to know it. The women march up to the cave and beyond it, parading the goods. It is far from a church, but there is the story of a church, and of a mosque, and prayer. The hiding is a mantling, a transporting, a spreading. Do you like dates? Do you like dates? Do you like dates? Do you like the color of a date with a bullet stuffed inside? Do you like revolution and boiling water poured over a soldier in the street, and dates and boiling water? Do you like looking out the window and seeing the cave, and the procession of women and children carrying rugs and dates and dresses and linens, filled with bullets and guns, and the soldiers looking right at them without a clue, the revolution, and bread of course, and dates and roses? There's a new problem. I want the windows open, but I do not want flies in the house. I wish I could ask the flies to leave nicely. Excuse me, the flies will not leave. There's been a misunderstanding. The cave has an entrance, which means there's also an exit, and the cat is in the lap. When I say craft, I do not mean the length of the meter or the pattern of the stanza. When I say craft, I mean the bullets sewn into the side of the skirt, and a hand grown weary from peeling tomatoes, and the boiling water poured from the balcony onto the soldier's head, and the threading of a needle, and gold thread, and gossip in the courtyard, and sound from the balcony. Nothing pleases me except dinner and revolution, and the park that became police station getting turned back into park, and the cave opening, and the dates bursting, and the cat landing properly on the table, the unconquerable roses. And according to some myth, these caves are close to one another, the ancient story and the recent one. This does not ease the horror. The caves are close considering distance, and the cats on the ground and on the table, perhaps 1,000 miles away, where the cats jump as they sometimes do. What did they think? Watching the country pass, who could they save? Knowing the revolution itself was right, this revolution and that one, the people making it. If there is to be a revolution, I pray the aunts carry it, and the rugs rolled up, carrying weapons and fuel under woven patterns. These are the movements. The day has been set, and the rugs are rolled, and the cats are jumping, and the women are collecting, and the birds, of course the birds, are here, for it is spring. Mantle it. The women are the tip of the spear. The women are laughing at the soldiers. The boiling water and the dates are waiting for many hands. For your hands, Irena. You know of the dates and the boiling water, and occupation, and the skirts, and the revolution. You taught it to so many of us. As you say, write, and come soon.
Thank you, Ayaz, and thank you to the Bureau for supporting that cross between worlds and time moment from Turkey. So the third reader, Clara Atri Mizrahi, studied social psychology at Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, UNAM. She holds an MFA in creative writing in Spanish from New York University and is currently working on a PhD in critical social/personality psychology at the Graduate Center at CUNY in New York City. Her first poetry collection, De la Boca de mi Madre, self-published, explores the intergenerational saying without saying, an alternate way of using language of Syrian Jewish women in Mexico. Her theater script, Nunca Estás Si Estás, has been selected for various stage readings and play development programs, including Cimientos 2024 at AITI Theater and Drama Lab in 2019 at King Juan Carlos I Center. Welcome again, Clarette.
Hi. I will say my thank yous after. I will start by saying two things that need to be said. My grandmother was supposed to be here, and I do not write poetry in English. This was the beginning of a poem, approving indeed in English, written to be read here today, a contorting, in order to be intelligible to you, to most of you. To some of you, I ask, who can bear blank faces, being sound, unformed sound, unintelligibility? Who can be making sound when one is offered a generous offer to become intelligible, not so much in English, but to an English-speaking audience? Yes, I could have read a couple short poems in Spanish, unformed sound, settled for a statement, but who wants to be that statement anymore? To leave a world out in a world where it is already left out is no statement at all. No doing at all, not even erasure, not even a conjuring of absence. My grandmother was supposed to be here. She was here last week. I do not write poetry in English, nor do I want to. I wrote a poem, an attempt at an opening. Yet what is here today is something else, not a poem. Poetry is very stubborn. It cannot be willed. Poetry is not a saying, it is a calibrating, becoming a fine-tuning in the mouth. Claret, mi abuela, vino la semana pasada y se quedó en mi casa por primera vez. Me dijo que yo era una ama de casa divina, yo. What is here today is something else. Not quite what was supposed to be here. What is here, prose, is out of time. Our words deny the simple beauty, the wild energy of the event, not a doing, but a retelling, and out of time. My grandmother Claret, who I'm named after, was supposed to be here, sitting amongst you, and with her, a whole world. A poem for her, read to all of you. Claret y Claret se quieren, love each other, she taught me. She would tell me before words, before I was able to say it back to her. She also taught me how to make fulem damas, a calibrating, becoming a fine-tuning, how to put some drops of mazahar, orange blossom water, in my coffee in the mornings, how to say a blessing in Arabic while reaching for the mezuzah when I walk out of my apartment, how to ask and insisting that fills the space already full to the brim, to every guest in my house, what else can I offer? What else can I give you? What else would you like? To be a table full to the brim with dried and fresh fruit for every person who comes into my apartment. Nuts, turmos, purple pickled turnips, atayef, tamarind, roscas de anís, cut vegetables, jícama, zanahoria, pepino, que más les doy, que quieres, roji, que les ofrezco. To hold kippeh, the Syrian Lebanese meat pockets, not only as the foundation of every food, but of every gesture. My grandmother taught me how to be surrounded in a crowd when saying something beautiful, when praising. Claret's house is delightful, she kept saying last week while at my apartment, with me around listening, when talking to her sons and daughters who called her on FaceTime every day. No sabes qué preciosa, She is so shatra, intelligent in Arabic, she was calling me. Not for doing a PhD, but for keeping a beautiful home. No sabes la comida, no sabes cómo me recibió, she kept telling everyone who called while I was around listening and smiling and smiling. To have had my grandmother, an Arab grandmother, say I am a great hostess is not a small accomplishment. To have had my grandmother, an Arab grandmother, say that her queer, single, no children, Hassan Sabi granddaughter, who looks like this, received her beautifully, una ama de casa divina, is not a small accomplishment. No sabes la comida, no sabes cómo me recibió, she kept telling her friends, surrounded, my house, a collectivity, my belongings, something beautiful, my hosting in good company. It was not that she couldn't tell me directly. She most certainly did that too. But my grandmother taught me that it is better to be surrounded in a crowd just like this one. Be a collectivity when saying something beautiful, when praising, when honoring. And so my insistence, my grandmother was supposed to be here, and with her a poem. My grandmother was supposed to be here, and with her a poem for her read to all of you. Yet, what is here today is something else. A borrowing. I thought, yes, when I was trying to figure out what to present here today, if not a poem for my grandmother, then a poem with Irena. Given that I don't write poetry in English, and that Irena and I come from such different worlds, I started wondering, writing a poem, borrowing a few of Irena's verses, asking something quite relevant for a conversation today. Can I use Irena's words without sameness being assumed? Can words be worlds rather than representation, identity? This is an experiment. What is poetry after all? How to say Irena's words in my mouth, open worlds, my world to you, without collapsing difference, my world to us. Why am I here? In a time, it is mostly always this time, when and where us is imposed, when us is weaponized, when us is a slip, a careless, well-intentioned, you and I, when us is a category, as a Jew, as a queer, as a this us is not me. When us is erasure, even though I am not fond of that concept, where us here is for closing of worlds. My grandmother said to me the other day, Lubnan ahla balad bil alam in Arabic. Líbano es el mejor país del mundo, she translates. Lebanon is the best country in the world. I translate sound, unformed sound. Language is not the only homeland. Why are we here? Such will to be known, Irena's words, this borrowing is a burrowing, an echo that burrows, a carving where we both become, not knowing who is land and who is words, not knowing who is skin and who is taste, your words of a distant world, not sameness in my mouth, a slight touching, her hand on my thigh, a texture that moves, movement grows and grows until it is an explosion of yearning. Who are you? 1 kilogramo de carne molida sin grasa, 1 kilogramo de trigo delgado, media cucharadita de pimienta árabe, una cucharadita de pimienta blanca, una cucharada de comino molido. Where are you from? 1/4 de taza de hojas de hierbabuena picadas, media cebolla picada, media taza de aceite de maíz con el jugo de medio limón, 1 kilogramo de tetvile, 3 tazas de aceite de maíz aproximadamente para freír. What is here today is something else. A recipe making kipe, a burrowing, a texturing of a world, borrowing Irena's words, making kipe. Se hace con las manos y el dedo índice humedecido, a calibrating. Se toma un pedazo de masa, making a hole using a moistened index finger, one hand inside the other, working around, digging your way, pressing, she tells me. She might be annoyed that I asked. pushing the walls gently against the palm of your hand, a fine-tuning, the index finger spinning, making hollow, a pocket is formed and closed with 2 fingers, a hole, a burrow, a whole world, not sameness, but volcano, I dream, yearning to explode. Look at my hands, is this English? What is here today is something else. The quite determined, I do not write poetry in English, nor do I want to, turned into a softening, a tender confession, I do not write poetry in English because I can't. What is here today is something else. A failed poem, a tender confession, fragmented attempts, a retelling that is always out of time. My family, Jewish, immigrated to Latin America throughout the 20th century, from Aleppo and Cairo on my father's side, and from Beirut and Damascus on my mother's side. I was born and raised in Mexico City, México lindo y querido. My family lived in a Jewish-Muslim world, in a world unlike this one, yet colonialism expelled both Arab Jews and Muslims from a world they had made and lived in for more than 2,000 years. This, a summary, an act of desperation, as though this world were a finished place, as though we were running out of time. We are not Claret. I will slow down. It is better to be surrounded, she taught me, in a crowd, be a collectivity when honoring, when praising, because words are not words, because words are not our words, yours or mine, they belong to the world, to worlds in the making. And so I stand here today saying, your poetry, Irena, a praising, your poetry, Irena, an honoring, worlds in the making.
Thank you. You want to we can do line by line?
Let's do that one then. Irena Klepfisz is a lesbian poet, essayist, translator, and activist, and a practicing secular Jew.
She was the co-founder and co-editor of the groundbreaking Conditions magazine, co-editor of the Tribe of Dinah, and promoter and translator of the works of the Yiddish women writers.
She taught Jewish women's studies at Barnard College for 22 years, and English and women's studies at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women.
She has focused much of her activism on reconciliation between Jews and Palestinians.
Her recent work, Her Birth and Later Years, Poems New and Collected, 1971 to 2021, it was the winner of the Audre Lorde Lesbian Poetry Prize from the Publishing Triangle and a finalist for the 2022 Jewish Book Council Prize in Poetry. I believe it's available with them.
Yes. In 2024, a bilingual edition of her poetry and prose appeared in Poland titled, I am going to lead you to the proper pronunciation to not dishonor it. The English translation is Between Worlds and published by, I will also leave that to you. Irena.
Welcome, Irena.
I'm totally overwhelmed. Sort of didn't expect to have to follow that. So I've changed some things already. Thank you so much. I mean, this whole event is really important to me, and I'm really interested in particularly what you said about language, because English was my fourth language. And I was very bad in English. It was my worst subject in high school. I was an immigrant. I came here when I was 8. And at that point, I knew Swedish, Polish, and I understood Yiddish. And I had to start learning English, and I didn't much like it. And I was thrown out of honors English in my my junior year, which was just the time when I was becoming interested in literature. And I was extremely upset because they were going to start reading Shakespeare the next year, in the senior year, and I wanted to be in that class, and I talked my way back into it. But it was a real problem for me, English, and one of the reasons I turned to poetry was because I naively thought that in poetry you couldn't be grammatically wrong, that anything you did would be okay, and nobody could tell you that, I used to get double grades, A for content, D for grammar. And so that's one of the reasons I turned to poetry in English, because I had no other language that I thought I could work in. I'm going to begin by sort of addressing what Clarette just talked about, this whole issue of language. There was a Yiddish writer that I was particularly interested in, because most Yiddish writers that emigrated to the United States, they emigrated here so they could continue writing in Yiddish. But Frauenstock was an exception, a total exception, unique, in that she tried actually to write in English. She was already recognized as a Yiddish poet. And it was a big failure. She wrote a novel that was really pretty awful. I read it. And she went back to English, to Yiddish. She was rumored at the time that I wrote this poem to have died in a mental institution, which turned out not to be true, but poetic license, serves. I'm not going to change the poem. This is called Frauenstock, the name of the poet, and the epigraph is from the poet in exile, Czesław Miłosz. Language is the only homeland. This is Fraudo speaking. They make it sound easy, some disjointed sentences, a few allusions to mankind. But for me, it was not so simple, more like trying to cover the distance from here to the corner or between two sounds. Think of it, heim and home, the meaning the same, of course, exactly. But the shift in vowel was the ocean in which I drowned. I did try. First held with Yiddish, but it's hard. You write gas and street echoes back. No resonance. And let's face it, memory falters. You try to keep track of the difference, like Gott and God and Huis and house, but they blur, and you start using alley when you mean Gesela, or avenue when it's a boulevard. And before you know it, you're on some alien path standing before a brick house, the door frame slightly familiar. Still, you can't place it exactly. Passers-by stop. Concerned, they speak, but you've heard all this before, the vowels shifting up and down, the subtle change in the guttural sounds. And now, it's nothing more than babble. And so you accept it. You're lost. This time, you really don't know where you are. Land or sea, the house floats before you. Perhaps you once sat at that window when it was home and looked out on that street, or Gesela. Perhaps it was a dead end. Perhaps a shortcut. Perhaps not. A movement by the door. They stand there beckoning, mouths open and closed. Come in, come in. I understood it was a welcome. A dank, I said, till I heard the lock snap behind me. Sorry, I had this marked. This is a poem, this is a poem that begins bilingually but ends totally in Yiddish. But if you pay really close attention, you can probably follow it. It's called Etliche Wörter auf Mammelischen, a few words in the mother tongue. Lamashal, for example, the kurve, the whore, a woman who acknowledges her passions. Die Yidina, the Jewish woman, ignorant, overbearing. Let's face it, every woman is one. Die Yenta, the gossip, the busybody who knows what's what and is never caught off guard. Die Lesbianka, the one with a roommate, though we never use the word. Das Weibel, the wife, or the little woman. Und daheim, at home, where she does everything to keep Yiddishkeit alive. Yiddishkeit, a way of being Jewish, always arguable. In Mark, where she buys die Kartoffel und challah, yes, potatoes and challah, die Kartoffel, the material counterpart of Yiddishkeit. Metzibelis with onions that bring Tränen zu die Augen, tears to her eyes when she sees how little it all is. Weniger, less and less. Die challah, braided via Hofa de Hasana, like her hair before the wedding when she was Asashem Mädel, such a pretty girl. Die lange schwarze Haar, the long black hair. Die lange schwarze Haar. A freie Hand, a woman dreams ihr Ort auf der Welt, her place in this world, und sie hat Moira, and she is afraid, so afraid of the words kurva, Yidina, Yenta, Lesbianke, Bible. Sie Holland, she dreams, und sie hat Moira, and she is afraid, ihr Ort, die Welt, die Heim, der Mark, a Mädel Holland, a Kurva Holland, a Yidina Holland, a Yenta Holland, a Lesbianke Holland, a Weibel Holland, die Kartoffel, die Challah, Yiddishkeit, sie Holland, die Hall, die lange schwarze Hall, sie Holland, sie Holland, sie Holland. And the last thing that I want to read, which is in English, but which has been difficult for me because I feel like it's another language, and that's writing about Judy's art, which it's in English, but it's another world. I feel like a ton of fish out of water. But I'm going to read you this poem that I just finished recently. Ariel will recognize some of it. This is called Judith Waterman, A Life. 1, Identity. My mother was against you from the moment she asked if you were Jewish. And for years she refused to forget or forgive your Midwestern Goyish birth. But when we first met, you proudly listed all the cheap Jewish food you'd found, like at Yonah Shimmel's in the East Village, and further uptown in the kitchen at Atron House with its delicious flanken and even cheaper brisket. You had hair down to your waist. One time a man in a Bronx diner saw you sitting at the counter drinking coffee before or after some job interview, and he demanded to know, "Hey lady, are you a hippie?" We laughed when you told me, but later you cut your beautiful hair because you thought it stopped you from getting those office jobs you so hated. A friend reported back to you that a couple of people who she'd sent you for a possible job asked her, why was she wearing men's shoes? Furious, you raged. I live in the country. What do they expect? High heels? Always questions about who you were, what you were. Always the insistence, apologies, explanations, justifications. One day, many years later, when we were already really old, we decided to check out the West Village where we'd once spent so much time, and found that the Duchess was gone. How many years already? And everything else. We stood stunned at the changes. We used to hang out for hours at the Italian cafe on Greenwich. It had plush chairs and overpriced coffee. Further south on 7th had been the women's coffee house where we'd sometimes go to sober up, or maybe meet up with friends. That day, while standing mute, just trying to adjust to the unfamiliar landscape, a young butch dyke approached and asked us gently, "Are you ladies lost? Do you need help?" She thought we were two elderly dykes from some small town watching for the first time the gay scene in central New York. We smiled and thanked her. She got the important part right. By the way, did I mention that you were an artist? 2, in the painting. You wrote in justifying the size of your canvases, "I worked in an apartment in Times Square. My studio space was exactly 12 feet wide, and my paintings at 11 feet allowed just enough space for me to turn them around and upside down." I had a sense of being in the painting since it dominated even my peripheral vision. Part of the time I looked through my reducing lens. I should emphasize that the scale of the work in relationship to the space of the studio represented my resistance to the limitations imposed from without. You said you disliked the inevitable distance between the viewer and the finished smaller work. A large canvas gives one the feeling of standing in the painting. In response to a question by a reporter about your process, you said that you wanted to avoid finishing them. Having the paintings there, you said, gave you a sense of security. You once told me that you liked waking in the morning and knowing they were there. You didn't title most of your canvases, but after your lover's death, you abandoned all colors and gave all those canvases names: Black River, Tombs, Inner Wall, Outer Wall, Memorials, Coffin. But the last ones returned to light, and you painted the coffin as lush and overflowing with celebratory, brilliantly colored flowers. During your lifetime, you completed more than 70 oiled canvases and more than 400 prints, etchings, and oil and watercolors on paper. 3, the artist at work. You were a probation officer and caseworker, a recreational leader and arts and crafts counselor, a part-time evening clerk in the picture department out into the 42nd Street Library, an extra on CBS soap operas, The Secret Storm and Love of Life, an artist for the Cultural Council Foundation's Artist Project through CEDA, painting public murals and leading art workshops for seniors, a word processor in the law office, an adjunct art instructor at Fairleigh Dickinson, North Adams State College, and Russell Sage, an adjunct for women's studies in art, as an adjunct women's studies and art instructor in the external adult degree program at Vermont College, a transcriber of taped reports, a companion to the sister of Edna St. Vincent Millay, an instructor in evening weekly ESL and GED classes for union members, an active member of the local AFL-CIO chapter and its negotiating committee, an organizer of our building, banding the tenants together to get it designated rent stabilized. There were never any benefits. You were 74 when your deteriorating health forced you to stop working. There was no pension. 4 years later, when you came home from the hospital with its antiseptic, deathly white beds, and saw your favorite maroon sheets waiting for you, you said, "Finally," and lay down. 3 days later, you passed into the painting.
We're gonna transition also gonna transition up front and invite both leaders up and invite some chairs. Yeah.
What do you want me to do?
Stay where you are. Take a seat. Yeah.
Pass the mic.
Yeah. Yeah, you can sit there and then with the Barrett one, move that microphone. Danilo and I can share a mic and. I don't think we can be off screen those.
That's
Things.
it.
That's it.
Disembodied voices.
Yeah. Do you want to sit on over to the Barrett one? Sure. Yeah. You want this? This? This.
We're on the frame for our YouTube viewers,
Yay.
present and future.
Yes.
Thanks again for joining us for our program today. And thanks again to Vera for hosting us. And thanks again to our amazing poets, artists, writers, for sharing their work, especially such an honor to hear recent work especially, and yeah, really appreciate you sort of really being so much in conversation and pulling so many beautiful threads from this collected works that we've all sort of had such the pleasure of I don't know, inhaling the last few weeks and thinking about such a rich legacy. Yeah, the first poems in the book start in 1971 and go through, the 2020s. And yeah, what a significant thing to think about, like, poets written, when you were our age through today. Yeah, so we'll have a few questions and then we'll have a little bit of time for audience Q&A as well. So first, you just published Between Worlds, which, as I was saying, features poetry and prose, which I really appreciated, from 1971 to the present, in English, translated into Polish. And one of the poems begins, I'm almost equidistant from two continents. I look back towards one, then forward towards the other. And of course, Ariel and Claret and your practices are so much about looking back and looking forward, and having that, having many worlds in conversation. So for each of you, how do you see this moment in your personal writing, artistic practices, and of course in this larger historical moment? But maybe a more poetic question, what worlds do you find yourself in and between?
Do you want me? I'm happy to go first. Between worlds, what worlds do I find myself in? Well, the digital and the physical, for sure. And also, the piece that I read, I wanted to write something fresh and thinking about how, there's so much clarifying force to your work, Irena, and I do think, I was thinking also about how you bring in people who are allegedly no longer alive. And so I think the Between Worlds thing, there's so much beautiful work around your obligation to history too, and personal history and larger histories, and there's something that compels me to try to channel people who, Elizabeth McCausland, art critic, art historian, curator, lesbian partner of also a closeted lesbian photographer. They were together in 1935 to 65. So I have to do a lot of between worlds to travel there. But it is a very present question of, we've seen a lot of rupturing, at least in my little itty bitty corner of, New York City writing. What does it mean to be an art writer this year? Ever since October 7th, there's been a lot of kind of shutting down of cultural spaces in New York City, cultural institutions, places like Art Forum or Art in America, for example, like venues that were sort of standard places for dialogue about there's a painter who has a show, a critic writes about the show, that gesture of witness. A lot of that has ruptured lately, and I think that there's something really exciting about asking, well, what was pressing for writers of other times who were living through, revolutionary times or possibilities of rapid change, and calling on us for transformation, and what catalyzed them, and how can, even if I didn't share an exact timescape with, Judy, for example, but I learn about her through the partner and through legacy, and bringing people's, the tensions and struggles of people's lives into contemporary writing feels like a way to bridge worlds. That's a first take at that. But I'm gonna pass it to you now, Clara.
I think very slowly and in movement, so I don't know my answers to these questions, if they're gonna be anything. But I was thinking about the looking back to look forward, and I thought, like, is it looking back to look forward, or is it a questioning of linear time? And so I think, that informs. I don't know if I can say more to that, but and I think poetry. I think I go into poetry because poetic language affords that, that questioning of that imposed linear time. And I think it is also a reality that we do live between worlds. I live between here and Mexico, and sometimes it's very torturous, and also with my family, and that is kind of all over the place. It's but I think that's where I'm thinking a little bit.
I was thinking before this event, I've done a lot of, it's turning out that I'm always pretty much the oldest person in the room, which hasn't happened before. And so, I started doing readings in the end of '70s. And so I've done a lot of readings, and I was thinking, this is the first reading or literary event that I've gone to when the government is being taken over by fascists. That context. It's a very totally different context, which made me think, well, what do you read out of reading when there's a government take over by fascists? And I never really came up with an answer except to do what I thought would be appropriate for this reading. And it's been one of the things that just even up until this moment, this is so much affirming that we have to keep doing these kinds of events, because it really does strengthen you for the struggle outside. You don't have to necessarily be talking about it directly in order to feel that effect. It's not like we're distracted into something irrelevant that we're going to forget. So I'm very grateful to have this opportunity, and I hope that there's more events that I want to participate in, that I want to go to, and to hear other writers. I think I've always, I have been very conscious of history, it's true, but part of it is just my background. I was born during the war. It's sort of hard to get that off your back. And so I always had that historical, I was always very focused on interwar Poland, which is where my parents grew up, and the Jewish labor movement, they were very active socialists. And so I always wanted to connect to that history in some way. So I sort of always looked to Europe. I felt for many, many years, I really felt rootless in America. I didn't feel I really belonged here, and I didn't feel I belonged over there either. But that's changed over time, and I feel more comfortable being in, I wouldn't say they're almost different worlds, but they're overlapping worlds, because we have an overlap right here today, I think. We're not divided, though maybe our circles are a little bit different. So I think it's good to have that. I think it's very enriching. I don't think it's destructive. I think it's, I used to do readings with Gloria Anzaldúa, and she didn't translate any of her Spanish. She refused, And we used to have big arguments about this because I felt left out. And so I think it's just really important to keep those strength, to keep holding on instead of diluting, to actually strengthen it, strengthen these different worlds, and make them more kind of vivid and present, and which is what I think is happening. They're trying to erase that and homogenize everything.
Amazing. And part of our conversation is also considering what it means not to just be between worlds, but also words. Irena, earlier you mentioned that English is your fourth language, but in the making of your Polish publication, you worked with a translator, Olga, and I was wondering if you could speak to what that experience was like for you.
I didn't really work with any of the translators. Olga was the one who, Kaminska was the one who had the original idea for the book. And that was in 2019. And she was going to do, I believe she had intended to do all the translations. I think that was the intent. She found the publisher, which is Words, Images, and Territory. That's the translation of the Polish version. But in the meantime, she had an illness, I had an illness, and COVID came. So the book was only just published this year. So it's been like 6 years, and it took really 14 translators.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
So you can imagine what that was like.
A lot of emails back.
There were a lot of emails. And I wasn't that, my Polish is very, very rudimentary. I mean, people tell me I have a great accent, but I have a great accent over very limited words, vocabulary. So I couldn't really check it except for maybe a couple of things that I know.
Yeah.
But, so I couldn't be really involved because I don't know the nuances of,
There's a lot of trust there then with the 14 other writers, or with Olga.
and also I always felt confident because the English was always there.
Right.
I mean, that's one of the great things I think about.
Printed on the page.
Yeah, it's printed on the page, and that's one of the great things I think of having a bilingual edition.
Yeah.
Even like my French isn't very good, but I like to see the
Yeah.
French with the English.
Yeah.
So, so I trusted the English. I corrected the English, but I trusted basically the Polish.
Amazing. And Claret, I want to bring you in on this conversation as well, because there's a section in Irena's book called A Few Words in the Mother Tongue, and your book of poetry is called From My Mother's Mouth. And you also work across languages of English, Spanish, and Arabic. And as we witnessed earlier today, much of your writing is directed towards your mother and towards your grandmother, Claret. And what is that like, working across multiple languages for you, and who you're speaking to on the page?
Most of my writing is directed to my mother and my grandmother, and I do not speak to them in English. And so it was very difficult for me to write what I wrote today. It was quite a process. But I was thinking about something that Irena said in her book about Yiddish being language of the Jews. And then I thought, and then Arabic is the language of the Jews. And then I thought, no, Arabic is not the language of the Jews. Arabic is the language of a Jewish world. And I thought this it came to me because I think this is very important, because it's not recovering a language. No, it's not recovering, like for me or Arabic, it comes with a world. And I think it's language that is spoken not only amongst Jews, and I think that's what's lost. When my grandmother was here last week, she wanted to eat Arab food every single day. And then we would go to the restaurants and she would tell the hostess, "Do you speak Arabic?" And then the waiter, and they were Colombian. And she didn't talk to them in Spanish. She was just wanting to speak to them in Arabic. And then we went to Atlantic at some of the stores, and she ended up, like, all of the people that were there, she was talking to in Arabic, and I could tell that there was a world there, and I could tell that there was a longing. And so yeah, I have also thought about, what if I stop longing that world? What if I stop longing Arabic and actually try to learn Arabic? If I actually try to go to Beirut, which I'm doing this summer, and just as a proposition, what if it's not about longing, which there's always gonna be longing for me, for that world. But what if my grandmother doesn't long because she is there, because she lives there? So yeah, that's a little bit of like my relationship, like my relationship to Spanish. And like Irena said, I am not bilingual in any means, or like, I can't even say that phrase. I am not bilingual, like I don't, like it doesn't come naturally to me to even be saying these words, you know? Like, but also I think poetic language is another language. And also it isn't like, language.
Okay, so we are here in the beautiful Bureau of General Services Queer Division, obviously hosted in the LGBT Center and in the West Village, and thinking about this moment for queer and trans people. You know, Em and I conceive about exquisites like in very explicit queer and trans terms, and like centering those writers and artists very intentionally. And obviously we find ourselves in a time, but it was really meaningful sort of reading your poems, that the earliest ones were written just a few years after the Stonewall uprisings, obviously took place just a handful of blocks from here. And you've also sort of been thinking a lot about cross-coalition work for a long time, as have, I think most of our panelists, thinking about different organizing fronts and missions. And the book that you won the Audre Lorde Award for Lesbian Poetry, available in the back. In the speech, which is printed in the prose section of the book, you recount marching and chanting with great exuberance. We're queer, we're poets, get used to it.
Put it on a hat.
Put it on a hat, yes,
It's you in the 1970s.
Ancient history.
But hey, but you said it in the mic just a few years ago, accepting this award, and it's still, put it on a hat.
I know. Coming to you summer of 2025.
Yes. And it really, this call is really like, and in the speech, and I think in a lot of what we've been thinking about are the stakes and this current moment of urgency, and what you describe as sort of this invitation, this need to gather all of our forces and presenting at front, and sort of warning against infighting and disowning the vulnerable, often the most vulnerable parts of our communities, and that being, in your words, not only immoral and inhumane, but something that will almost guarantee a fascist victory. And also, as we were saying earlier in terms of the context of this event and of our lives in the present day, So how are each of you seeing this moment as queer artists, writers, organizers, and particularly thinking about these intersecting betweenness identities, cross-movement work, in this beautiful pink queer room we're in together?
So I think, first of all, it's just intergenerational relationships, dialogue. I feel like in terms of like, we're in a time where it's like, let's get back to like, what do we know can like fortify us? And I think conversations across the generational divides is something that I personally find useful, but I also think it is something that, because of, it's just, there's so many years of the state and of structural violence that have been laid out for a really long time now. And so I'm a big proponent of just like study and relationships as being a groundwork for thinking about getting through this time, and also like really thinking about the right-wing tools of repression are not new, and that the one way to sort of find these blueprints is to study, the first culture war, which I think a lot about Jesse Helms in the late 1980s, trying to like censor quote unquote queer art, and try to defund HIV/AIDS education, things that were, like these sort of like trying to destroy trans and queer liberation movements with all these sort of small slashes of budgets, but that had really, like draconian and terrible consequences in terms of public health. And so really, I'm interested in like creating trans and queer education projects around that is very focused on the tactics of struggle from 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And I think like Irena's a real inspiration in that, because oftentimes culture is taken for granted. And I think this phrase, like Jesse Helms's project to defund the National Endowment for the Arts, has really found its final kind of, he's probably happy about where it is right now, even though he's dead, in the sense that like, the defunding of things, like we need to build our own structures. And like Irena worked, spending so many years on conditions, your peers, like I was just at the Jewish Voice for Peace National Convening and I saw Barbara Smith, just out and about and thinking about Kitchen Table Press, like all of these publishing projects, editorial projects, like it's just like about making sure the cultural records exist so that we have documentation to keep doing the intergenerational dialogue. So that's kind of my, how do we get through this time? But, I think there's a certain level of obsessiveness too that I can fall prey to in trying to stay up to date on things, and it's really, really special to just be here together. And it's no small feat to organize a reading and to have a queer bookstore, so I'm just like kind of overwhelmed with gratitude too, which I think is a way to stay present and not freak out. But that is my,
I know I'm supposed to say something wise, but part of the attitude, the thing that I remember best was that, when I first came out in 73 to myself, and then publicly, like maybe a year late, it took me about a year to sort of come out publicly. It was not easy then. It was very hostile time. It was just like a few years after Stonewall, and I knew nothing. I had not been focused in that direction at all. I hadn't been thinking about my sexuality, so it's all very, very new to me. But one of the things that I remember about us is that, there's a kind of naivete of, they always say, where angels fear to tread, it's sort of, we just said, well, nobody's going to publish us, so we'll create something. It was like, it was casual almost in a way. Kind of, we didn't spend a lot of energy fighting against whatever it was. We just used the energy for whatever we could for ourselves. We saved it for ourselves. that, for example, vanity presses, I mean, to self-publish was considered the most, vanity press was about the worst thing that you could be labeled as, a vanity poet, you published your own stuff. Well, we said, no, fuck it, Joan Larkin said, I'm gonna make an imprint, Out and Out Books. We're all gonna pay for our own book. We're gonna pretend it's a press. Everybody will have Out and Out Books on it. Nobody will know except us. And we acted like, we didn't moan and groan about the others. And there was a kind of almost chutzpah about it, it was like, and we just ignored it. To me, looking back on it, I'm sort of stunned at it, I have to say, because there was not a real discussion. Should we do this? Will it be effective? Who will read us? Nobody will read it. I mean, we just did it. And I think that's something that's just sort of to take back and to think about, because I know, like, I try not to turn on the news for 5 hours, that's, because what's the latest horror that I'm gonna find out about? And to try to put energy into whatever immediately I could, do something about it.
Yeah, and I think that's also what we're doing here,
Yes,
It's
exactly.
like, this is the creating of worlds.
Yes.
These are worlds emerging. And yeah, I think when you were asking the question, I was like, I want to go to Irina's house and have coffee and talk to her. That is my action. That is the thing that I'm going to do, and see what happens. But yeah, I think they're not even in the same world. I think that action of creation and also the work that needs to be done, which is denouncing, etc. They might not exist in the same world, but I want to spend more time in the emerging worlds for some reason.
Thank you. Yeah, just as you all were speaking, and especially as Irena was speaking, like Danilo and I, like to speak about cross generations and cross decades, like we were having those exact same conversations 3 years ago when we were deciding whether or not we were going to form Exquisites. We were like, we're coming out of the pandemic, there aren't a lot of readings, we get paid to work for institutions who put up artists and writers, and we have all these skill sets, but we don't see enough of those skill sets coming back to our community. And like, we don't see enough of our community members being platformed, or as Daniela was speaking to earlier, like the most vulnerable amongst us, like the voices that need to be heard the most. And then we started with a reading series, and then we were like, you know what we need? We need workshops, because workshops are expensive and none of us have money. So we started workshops, and then we were like, wait, what about the archive, erasure? They'd love to burn our books. Like, so we were like, fine, we'll print more, fuck it. So it is kind of, yeah, that like reinforcing of like back to the basics, like something that Ariel was speaking earlier of being like, what have we always done? What have the generations before us, our elders before us always done? Like, it's the ABCs. And amongst those ABCs is like, get a coffee with your friend, check in on them, ask them how they are doing, because we have to be present and connected to even be able to like step into the next day. And with that, we'd like to bridge the gap now and to connect to y'all. I think we have time for like 1 or 2 questions from the audience, if anybody has anything they'd like to ask. Let me actually check the time. Yeah, that's pretty accurate, okay. It can be like, what's your favorite color? It doesn't have to be.
No, please don't.
Somebody must have a question now. Just,
I had a question.
Yes, thank you.
Can I request a poem?
Ooh.
Is that really?
I love it.
Okay, you're responding positively. I even printed it out, so you don't have to fish it out in your.
What?
I printed out a poem of yours.
No, okay, I have a book too.
I know, but what do you want to, it's this poem. Do you want to consider it
Oh,
first?
sure.
Yes?
Okay, I can even hold the mic for you.
How close? This is a poem for Judy beginning a new job. I will keep this simple, not give it universal significance, nor transform it into art. You say, I will not do this forever. I will paint. I've learned now that it's no solace to point out the others, so many others, straining, wasting, unable to do what they know they must do. For such loss is only solitary and unshared, outside the scope of bloodless theory. You do not paint, and what must happen does not happen. The transformation on the empty canvas of the elusive marble into the shadowy water, or of the simple water into impenetrable rock. And nothing, not even a loving embrace, nor special intimate midnight talk will ever make up or diminish that loss for you, or for her, or her, or her.
I think with that, we're going to transition to the second portion, which is just enjoying each other's company. The pita has arrived, so there is more snacks in the back. The others, snacks, water, stay hydrated. Talk to each other, come speak to, if you do have a question but you didn't want to make it public, you can come speak to Irena. There are these bookmarks that are around this space commemorative of the day, where the poem of Irena is in English on one side and in Polish on the other. If you didn't have one, if you'd like a second, please come to us. We have many. Daniela, do you want to just?
Yeah, and thanks again to our partners at the Polish Cultural Institute New York for making this possible, for all the cultural work that they're doing. Thank you, Bartek and company. Again, thanks to the Bureau and the whole team here, making our hybrid cross world.
DIY, we see you.
Yes.
We love you.
And if your friends missed the reading, it'll be in the archive on YouTube that you can rewatch. We have some upcoming readings, June 5th at Aberdeen Community Garden in Bushwick, and July 13th at New York City Poetry Fest on Governor's Island.
Yeah, there may be a hat with Irena's blessing. We're queer, we're poets, get used to it, you know.
Oh, amazing.
Potentials in the air.
We love a more
Irena Klepfisz.
Yes.
Shirts,
Yes.
ideas are, possibilities are endless.
We love merch.
Yes, I love it. And thanks again to our poets, Claire.
Thank you so much for being
Ariel, Irena, Ayaz from Turkey.
Yes, taking Ayaz into the room.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Goodbye, online audience.